It's time for a reality check.
We're here to deconstruct health and fitness trends and provide tangible advice so you can become 1% better with each choice starting today. Welcome to Reality Check. We are your hosts, Jess and Jill. And today we've had so many lovely guests. And today we have Brooke Davis on. She is a fellow coach in the space. And typically I find these connections either through a piece of content that I saw that I loved, or in Brooke and I's case, we're in some like mingling of groups of coaches and we kind of connected there. And we'll obviously tag her social media in the show notes for you guys, but she has such incredible content, especially for our perimenopausal clients. So listen up if this applies to you, because she's going to have some good stuff for you guys. But Brooke, we are excited to have you on here, and I would love for you to just give an intro of who you are and what you do and who you help and all that fun stuff.
Hello, and thank you guys for having me. I am excited to chat. I am a functional nutritionist, fitness coach. I have been coaching for a little over 14 years now, which is really weird to say. But I have two kiddos. I am married, also been married for almost 15 years. And I kind of got into this demographic just based on, I mostly work with women. I trained in person for a long time, and then I did chiropractic rehab, and it kind of, hormonally started with my own journey, competing and all of that. But, recognizing that in myself and then seeing my clients come into this phase of life and be struggling so much with hormonal issues and seeing the Western medical approach to, or dismissal, mostly, quite honestly, to the things that they were going through was really frustrating and very eye-opening, which really just encouraged and motivated me to dive in and learn more, which brought me to kind of where I'm at now, is focusing on providing information and support for women going through this, because it is a lot. And like I said, lack of really even education, unfortunately, behind it all from Western medical providers and conventional, doctors is very, very limited. It's quite shocking. So yeah.
No, I feel like we have that conversation a lot. And I'm sure all of us in the space to some degree have an experience that was like life-changing for us or eye-opening for us to some degree. And like, okay, I'm going to approach this differently, or my perspective has changed, or I want to help people with this. So I love that so much. And you've been in the space a long time. So obviously I'm sure you've seen the evolution of all of these things, but tell me a little bit about like your approach and what you do or focus on with your clients in this demographic specifically, or like what are the big problems that you see that they're looking to address?
Yeah. I think we can all, know this one. One of the biggest is weight gain. And stubborn belly fat is the biggest complaint. Usually it is actually like self-reported as one of the most common symptoms. But then, everything that comes along with that, hormonal fluctuation, and, some people are a little bit different. Weight gain is the most common. And then, just from the impact and the role that estrogen and progesterone play on and throughout the entire body, there's literally over 100 symptoms that can present as like perimenopause and, the fluctuations in those hormones in the body. And so, there is a whole range of them. As far as, approach to this, the reality of it is that it is a lot of foundational work. But the difference is that results are always going to be slower. Simply because the body, you are fighting an uphill battle, is the reality of it. And the other thing is that you cannot take an extreme approach. And that is something that so many women, hormonal or, menopausal or not,
Take your snap.
struggle with, right? Because everything that they've done up until now has been, extreme calorie restriction, cutting out all these things, working out twice a day, and their body used to respond to that. However, the stress load on a perimenopausal woman, because of the fluctuations that they are dealing with, hormone-wise, are already such a big stressor on their body. They can't do that anymore. And not only do they not see results doing that, but a lot of times they'll see the opposite. They will gain more weight. Their body will become more inflamed. Their brain fog will increase. Like it really does become, we use the term metabolic chaos. And it's this downstream, cyclone effect of stress on the body that then starts to impact a bunch of other systems, which makes weight gain even harder to lose, potentially, again, increasing, what they're experiencing. So back to, the foundations of making sure that they are actually nourishing and supporting their body, not just trying to starve it of, food and restrict, extreme calorie restriction. So somewhere just slightly below maintenance is generally where they will see the best results. And then, of course, building muscle, building and maintaining muscle, which it's getting easier to convince women of this, which is nice, because it used to, 14 years ago, it was a lot more difficult, but muscle is metabolically active. It's a powerful tool to not only, manage weight gain and change body composition and, for them to see the results that they ultimately want, but it actually helps support the hormonal shifts that they're going through and, balancing blood sugar and allowing them to live a long, full, capable life, which is ultimately what everybody actually wants, not just weight loss, despite, how they feel in the moment. And so, building muscle.
That's great.
Those are kind of the main two things that
Literally, you're like, I think our third guest in a row to say like muscle is the most important.
Build muscle.
Like we're hitting it home. I hope everyone is capturing that essence because that's what we're always trying to hit home.
Something that we talk about a lot, I guess, is we have a lot of women who will come to us, and Jill does a great job with her social media and getting people like, oh, I think she can help me. This is my problem, right? And at the end of the day, we are like, okay, we agree. There are probably hormonal issues going on, right? But also, here's all the things we can do behaviorally that impact your hormones in a positive way. And I think that there's a big disconnect there because people just want a quick fix for their hormone problem. And it's like, well, hold on a second. What does your sleep routine look like? Are we grinding our bodies, doing cardio at way too high of intensity 7 days a week? Or are we adding muscle? Are we starving ourselves? Like, I think a lot of clients don't understand the stressors that they're putting on their body because they're like, no, I'm not stressed. And it's like, okay, but being in a severe diet is a stressor. Staying up scrolling on your phone, even though you feel relaxed, that's a stressor, right? Like there's all these other components that they don't realize are taxing their hormonal system. I was looking through your social media and I just love how you provide such nuance and context to each thing of like, okay, if you want to learn more about fasting, here's the things that it does. And here's some of the consequences, right? Like we need to know the full picture before we just go dishing out these things. So you talked about muscle. What are some of the other biggest things that you see that people can start to work on right now if they're like, well, I know my hormones are a problem?
Yeah. Well, you mentioned, stress. Stress is what I essentially refer to as the number one root cause, right? You can look into your hormones or gut health or, whatever else, your thyroid, but the reality is that it comes down to stress on the body and what your body has the capacity for. And we call that like your vital reserve. That is your bank account of the amount of, again, capacity that your body has to handle the stressors being placed on it, including being in a deficit, exercise, not getting enough sleep. Are you rejuvenating enough? All of that comes to play. But right, people think about stress and they're like, well, I don't feel stressed. And it's like, well, your hormones are essentially they're a messenger. That's your messenger system. That is the body's and then symptoms are your body's communication signal to tell you that you're stressed in some capacity, and it comes in a lot of different forms. So, being able to manage that in the best way possible with the things you can control. And, that is your sphere of influence, right? We can't control what's happening across the world or what's happening on, social media. And sometimes we can't control our boss even, for the most part, or our jobs. And so focusing on, like you said, sleep, right? If you're able to, and this is also disrupted in perimenopause. So sometimes people are like, oh yeah, that's great. That would be great. I would love to get, 7 to 9 hours of sleep. But even, like you said, habits, right? Even if your sleep isn't great, if you establish a solid bedtime routine to where you're setting yourself up for the best possible sleep that you can control, that's one big aspect. And then, the component of your mental health and recognizing, like just recently, I've had a lot of clients being like, okay, I'm recognizing that social media is like, I'm in the comparison trap. For me, it's like political stuff gets to me. So like I have, you have to set these boundaries, and recognize what is taxing you, what is pulling from your mental health, and then just boundaries in general, actually, whether that's with family or friends or people needing things from you. So those are all kind of what I would say more hidden stressors that are more controllable versus, again, the things that you can't. And utilizing, taking time out of your day, take 5 minutes to sit and take some deep breaths. That can do absolute wonders for your entire body or but especially your mental health, and just downregulate, right? Get you into that parasympathetic state, allow your body to recover, even if it's just for those 5 minutes. You'll be better for the rest of the day for it. Does that answer your question? I tend to ramble. I go off on shoots.
No. These are great. And I think a lot of the women who find themselves in this highly stressed, highly taxed situation are like type A go-getters, super successful. And they're like, sitting and breathing is a waste of my time. Or like, I don't want to do yoga or guided meditation because it's boring. And it's like, yeah, it is. But like, that's what your body needs right now in this state. Like a lot of people I think are like, no, it's just because my age. And it's like, okay, like it's starting to catch up with you. All these stressors that you've been putting on your body for years are now you're experiencing the symptoms of it. It's not strictly because of age, because there's other people who have taken different pathways, who aren't in that same situation, right? So it takes a long time to unwind because it's taken a lot of years to build up that tax on the body.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I always say the worse it is, or like the harder it is, the more you need it. And that is, generally from a physical aspect, but as well as a mental one, right? You have, we call them like monkey brain is what I've referred to. You're like, oh, let's go over here, kind of there, squirrel, whatever. But the more you have that, right, the more that is a sign that you need to come back to the present, chill out, right? That just means you need it more. So when people tell me that, I'm like, oh, good, should try it again.
Love that. You shared too that when you came into the space, that you were like in the bodybuilding world at some point. So I would love to hear like kind of what that evolution was, and what you mentioned kind of going through your own like shift with hormones. Like what was your experience with that kind of made you say like, okay, I need to do something different?
Yeah. So I competed over 4 years, and and this is what was like really eye-opening for me, is that in terms of, comparison, the approach that I used was not extreme at all. Like I was a trainer, and yes, I was teaching I was teaching multiple classes a day. And on top of that, like, yes, I would go do my cardio. But like my calories never got lower than like 1800. I was aware of macros at the time. Like, it was like fairly solid. Probably could have been better nutrient wise, because I was doing IIFYM, or if it fits your macros. So I'd be like, halo top, all that kind of stuff. So it could have been definitely better that way. But again, for the most part, and in terms of comparison, it wasn't super extreme. But I competed. I went to nationals in 2016. And before every show, I would lose my period. And I really, like, at that time, I didn't think anything. I was just like, oh, that's convenient. Like, cool. Make sure I wasn't pregnant. Or like, all right, good to go. And I would get it back basically like the month after my competition, go back to normal, whatever. But after I went to national, I placed ninth, which was cool. But and even I had hired a coach prior to that, and she had me eating like 2,400 calories. I was only at that point, I was like 12 weeks out. So, the tail end of getting ready, but I was eating 300 grams of carbs, 2,400 calories, like very like shit ton of food.
Healthy, really healthy for a body. But I mean, you rarely ever hear a bodybuilder saying their deficit is 1,800. I love hearing that.
Yeah. And so I was like, okay, like I'm okay. But I had lost my cycle for 6 months up to nationals. And then it took me a little over 3 months afterwards to get it back. And in that time, I gained 30 pounds, which was probably like where I needed to be like healthily, but it was like, oh God, what's happening to me? And I couldn't get it off. I was like following macros and, I had definitely decreased my output. I was still teaching classes. So like I could only do so much in terms of, and I didn't stop lifting, of course, but, the amount of like intentional cardio, things like that had decreased. But like I wasn't losing weight and it freaked me out, honestly. So like my body has never not responded to what I, told it to do basically. And essentially it took me, doing a lot of research and diving more into, again, the hormonal aspect of it, like losing my cycle, what that meant, all of that. And at that point, my husband and I were talking about having kids and I'm like, well, I need that. So I basically, I also in that time period of like trying to lose that weight, I was doing intermittent fasting, which as we all know, and I was doing it very wrong. I would go like till noon basically to stop eating or to my fasting window was until noon. And then I had to work out on my lunch break. And so I would work out and then I would try and like shove some food on my lunch break and then like snack the rest of the day, and then come home and be like starving. It was terrible. And so I lost my cycle again. That was after I had gotten it back and I was trying to lose that weight, lost it again during that intermittent fasting period. I was like, hey, well, that's clearly not the answer. And still wasn't losing weight. And so finally I was just like, okay, I hired a trainer, where I worked. I was working in chiropractic rehab and was like, I just want to be strong. I want to be fast. And I prioritized my physical, abilities and focused on that as a goal. And just started like eating for quality. I was eating a ton of food. I just focused on whole nutrient dense foods, which my husband's an organic farmer. So, not that was ever like out of my mind, but it just became more intentional at this point. And I think it was like 6 months later, I really like my composition changed. I didn't necessarily actually lose weight, but I was like lifting the heaviest that I had ever lifted. I was snatching like over 100 pounds. And so I definitely like felt that. And then I got pregnant. So obviously that,
hormone health was improving.
Yeah.
How long was that journey of just focusing on performance and then being like, wow, I'm like back to healthy?
Yeah. Probably about 9 months to a year.
I love this story. Love
so
it.
Not quick.
Not yeah, quick. It's not. And especially it's like 4 years of competing and doing these ups and downs and ups and downs. I feel like a lot of people do that and then they're like, okay, I just need to lose the weight. And obviously we work with people who hire us, right? So they're like, okay, I'm going to have you for this amount of time. In 2 months, can we go into a deficit? And it's like, how many years have you been dieting, right? Like in our ideal world, everybody would spend 6 months to a year just building and being healthy. I like your approach too of shifting, and this may have been intentional or not, but when we start to get to this place of being really frustrated that the scale isn't moving, shifting our focus to performance, shifting our focus to how deep can I get in my squat, to a skill, to those types of goals. Because when you start to focus on that, this other thing over here, the physique stuff changes as a side effect of just being healthier, focusing on food quality. All of that stuff happens with time, regardless of how the scale is moving. And then I had a similar experience, and a couple years into it, I'm like, whoa, I'm up 20 pounds, but I feel so healthy. I look just as toned, if not more than I did when I was 20 pounds lighter, because I'm actually healthy now.
Yeah, absolutely. That is, I mean, and that's, we work on that shift with clients too, but it was something that came kind of like unintentionally for me. I was just like, like if I can't lose weight, like I might as well be strong as well. Like let's just forget about this for a little bit. And and it worked. So like I said, it was something that it was intentional at the time, but it wasn't, I didn't know that it was like gonna work. I'm just like, whatever, I have to forget about this because it's not working. It did. So like I said, I got pregnant, and throughout pregnancy, obviously your hormones are it's chaos again. But even I trained through pregnancy and postpartum. My weight loss, like, it was easy. It was I was able to get back down to like a healthy weight. I will never weigh what I weighed competing, and that's totally okay with me. But what's crazy, I have 2 kids, so, 2 pregnancies later, I weigh what I weighed back then, but like have a 6-pack. Like, it's so that, that progress, has obviously been made, but it didn't come from me prioritizing weight loss.
Yeah, I love that so much. So we always want to talk, have like super tangible takeaways for people in the episode. So like for perimenopausal women that are coming to you and they're having symptoms, whatever the case is, right? What are your I know this answer and I just want them to all hear it, but what are your like big rocks that you move first? Like what's like, okay, no matter what you have going on, like this is where we need to start.
Yeah. So there was actually a study just came out. It was through Zoe, it's like an app. I'm not 100% actually sure what all they do, but it was a self-reported study, but the study showed that basically the better the food quality and this was purely on menopausal and post-menopausal women, but the higher the food quality, the less symptoms they had, up to 40% reduction in symptoms. So, I mean, step number 1 in terms of takeaway is to prioritize whole nutrient dense foods as much as possible. There's like the 80-20 rule, but honestly, from what I've experienced and what I, have seen in perimenopausal, it kind of comes to more like a 90-10. You do still have some flexibility, but it is a little bit less than, when hormones are functioning properly and you're not really trying to, support this inevitable decline. And that's the reality of it, is that yes, like you can support your body. There are things you can do. You can still get results, all this, but you can't stop menopause, like it's coming. And so there are some things that you do have to adjust. But like I said, one of them, food quality, 100% is like first and foremost.
And when you talk about nutrient dense foods, I think a lot of people come to us and they're like, I eat so healthy, and they actually don't have a concept. Like, we're all nutrition coaches talking to each other. When we're talking about nutrient dense foods, we're talking about foods that have a lot of vitamins and minerals and proteins and fibers. So think things that look more like the plant or animal they came from. We're not talking health foods that are packaged to have low calories or low fat or low carb. We're talking like, okay, eat some plants, eat some meat that hasn't been overly processed. Those are the types of foods. If you guys want inspiration on this, we do not say go restrict anything. But if you look up like a Whole30 food list or a Mediterranean diet food list, that's kind of the direction we're talking about in terms of things you want to add. Yep. Okay, sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to kind of like squeeze that in there. Go on, continue.
Totally. Great clarification. But yeah, and one thing that you mentioned, is instead of thinking about what you have to cut out, right? Think about what you can add in. And I like to go by meal. So like start with breakfast. Like, do you have, 30 grams of protein at breakfast? Are you getting some fiber in? Like, do you have a fruit or vegetable at breakfast? If not, like start there. Work your way down with, those targets in mind, again, with that, the whole foods kind of thing. So that would be.
What's your take on fasting being in the functional space? Because obviously we know that fasting has a time and a place in certain conditions and scenarios, but I feel like, and I would love to hear if you experience this too, that a large majority of women in the perimenopausal age and range and starting to experience it and enter that realm come to me fasting, and they're like, this is just what works. This is what I have to do. What's your, I know.
Why are you here?
Yeah.
If it's working,
works,
yeah.
right? Yeah, I know it's working, but you're in my DMs. Love all of you. Happy to help. But yeah, what's your take on that? Because again, when there is a time and a place to implement a fasting protocol for certain scenarios. But again, I just want them to hear this message from you.
Yeah. So I just did a whole podcast on this, and there are some, again, like amazing benefits to fasting. But who was it? Was it Dr. Sean Pastuch? I don't know. It was a reel I saw, but really interesting, and I was going to look into it more. But basically, the autophagy thing, and a reason that a lot of people fast. So actually occurs during exercise too. So that was a cool little tidbit. But the problem with most women, again, in this phase of life fasting, is first of all, they're not eating enough to begin with. That is what on a regular basis. And it is, you give somebody a target of 2,000 calories and they're like, I've never eaten that much in my entire life. And I'm like, well, that's what it takes to sustain a 145-pound woman not doing any exercise, and you're training twice a day, so that becomes the first issue. And the reality is it is actually kind of hard to eat enough, again, nutrient dense, like whole foods. It's super high volume, and enough protein, which is also their eyes glaze over when you're 30 grams of protein at each meal, as a minimum. And they're like, wait, you want me to eat what? And so the main problem with that becomes that they then further reduce their calories. They literally can't get enough food in this fasting window to sustain and support, their bodies the way that it needs. And, then when you're talking cortisol response and low blood sugar and, things like that, it's a whole nother shitstorm of things that interrupt their ultimate goal, which is fat loss. It just ends up being more stress on their body because it's not usually applied in the right ways, and it's very difficult for them to apply in the right ways.
Well, and let's be real, I would say it's safe to assume that none of them are doing the fasting for the autophagy benefits, or right?
They're doing it because they think they're going to lose weight.
Right. They think there's something inherently fat burning about fasting, which I feel like we're making progress, but it definitely still comes up a lot.
But any caloric deficit also causes some level of autophagy too. But then you have this behavioral, psychological component where you're fighting yourself all day because you think you have to skip a meal. And then half of the time when women come to us and they are doing that, they're like, I don't know why I'm binge eating every night. I can't stop these cravings. It's like, let's just add breakfast and see what happens. And then 99% of the time, they're like, this is wild. I feel satisfied throughout the day.
Yeah. Well, and, with the restriction of it, like you said, it's if they do lose fat, it is simply when compared to any other kind of diet, it's because they were in a caloric deficit. It's not magic. So, but, shifting again, as you guys know, the biggest hurdle to overcome in any kind of coaching is the mental one. And, the beliefs that we have about, ourselves but also, the input from everywhere else and what other people say and social media. And it's just gotten worse, obviously, over the years, to try and debunk and navigate, the reality of what it takes to achieve what they want.
Yeah. So you talked about more high quality foods, more nutrient dense foods, starting with breakfast and just adding 30 grams of protein and some fiber, some fruits or vegetables. What do you do when people are like, hey, what supplement should I take? I'm perimenopausal. I'm menopausal. I need supplements. What's your answer for people?
I do. There are some, in my opinion, kind of foundational things that honestly, everybody should be taking at this point. Our food soil quality has gotten to a point where, like I said, my husband's an organic farmer, and despite that, he uses so many supplements, but fertilizers, things like that. They're all organic, but it's, nutrients that the soil has been depleted of. And that transfers to our food. And with our, again, food supply, we monocrop, we don't rotate, where crops are grown. The soil is completely depleted. We simply just feed the plant more. A lot of our food, some of our food at this point is hydroponic. So it's literally just been fed these nutrients. Which, it's all a debatable topic, but, and so I do think that there are some foundational things that pretty much everybody should be taking. And of course, always ask your doctor before taking any supplements. But things like omega-3s, magnesium is a huge, over 50% of the population is deficient in magnesium. And so those are, and vitamin D can be tested. But again, that's another one that most people are deficient in, whether that's an absorption issue, that's a whole nother thing. But if somebody's coming to me and it's just what supplement should I take? I'm like, well, can we look at your nutrition first? And that, there are obviously changes that can be made prior to spending a bunch of money on supplements, because that's not
the biggest impact thing, right? Yeah, we did a whole episode on supplements, and those are the 3 that we recommended, along with maybe protein supplementation if you're having a tough time hitting your goal, right?
Sure. Yeah.
So you don't have anything on the top of your mind that is perimenopausal or menopause specific, without seeing somebody's labs, obviously.
Yeah. No, honestly, even a lot of people will be like calcium, you have to take calcium. But that's sometimes more problematic if they're not absorbing it, using it right. So yeah, like I said, those are, in terms of, foundational things, it's not different necessarily. It just becomes, again, more important in that phase of life to make sure that you are, being supported as much as possible.
I love that you just said that about calcium. And I feel like that was really important for people to hear, because I can't imagine how many women Google, what supplements should I take? And they're like, oh, I need to take calcium. I need to take this, 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 and this, and this. And this is my hot flashes, but they're eating 1,200 calories. And then they're like, well, none of these symptoms are working. Or like you said, they're not even absorbing the nutrients, or they're not using it properly, or they're overdoing it, right? They're just taking random doses of things. So I think that was such a great point to make too. So, okay. For the perimenopausal or just hormonal chaos woman listening to this, nutrient dense foods, 30 grams protein. I love this. What else are you before you look at supplements and labs and testing and all of this? What are the things that they listen to this episode and take away from you?
Hydration. Obviously that's sometimes I forget about that, because I'm like, you got to be drinking water, right? We live in, coming to Mexico is you can't drink the water, right? So obviously we're getting it, in 5-gallon buckets, but it's we have very accessible, clean, great, one of the biggest health improvement, aspects that you can use is water. And so many people are like, oh, I drink 3 cups a day. You're like, so yeah, hydration, of course, going at least half your body weight in ounces, and sleep, like we touched on, as much as possible, creating that sleep foundation, stress reduction, taking some, breaths every once in a while. And then of course, exercise, movement, right? But again, moderating that. We're not looking for extremes. Of course, prioritizing strength training, building muscle, building and maintaining muscle, because of course it's declining once we hit 30 at an exponential rate. And then power work is one thing that I see is really overlooked. I think largely because of fear, injury. Injuries are real, especially again if you're coming out of you're coming in deconditioned, you haven't done things, you're maybe not exercising at all. Obviously, it needs to be approached appropriately. But power work is so important for perimenopausal and menopausal women. Not just for muscle, but for bone density. Those I would say. Yeah, exercise, stress reduction, supplementation, diet, rest, exercise, stress reduction, and supplementation is kind of our DRESS protocol, touching on, the main movers and the foundational components of overall health.
Love this. Okay. So now tell everyone where they can find you. I know that you have a podcast. Obviously, we're connected on social media, so we'll share all these links, but tell everyone where they can follow you and find you and still access all of these tips on a regular basis.
Yeah. So my social media is Brooke_Elysian. Our website is ElysianWomen'sWellness.com. And we have free hormonal analysis on that. And I'm on Facebook, Brooke Davis.
And you have a podcast.
Oh, yeah, I do have a podcast. That's
Fitness
right. My
Simplified.
podcast. Fitness Simplified. Yes. Like, oh, yeah.
Oh, love this. Okay. Well, thank you so much. I think this was so helpful and just some important points for us to hit home again and again that I think everyone needs to hear a million times, sometimes before it connects, which is okay. That's why we're here and sending these messages. But thank you so much for being on and sharing all of this. And we're excited to follow along and keep learning from you.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, ladies, for having me. It was great officially meeting you both.
Dogs are saying goodbye too. Thank you so much.
We can't hear them on our end.
Oh, good. Beautiful. All right. Thanks, guys.